Welcome to Monk's Temple. Please, make yourself comfortable. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, just for now, let it all be. There's nowhere you need to go in this moment, nothing you need to achieve. Simply arrive. Feel the gentle rise and fall of your own breath, an anchor in the sea of your thoughts. Today, we embark on a quiet journey inward, exploring a simple, profound truth, that our deepest peace isn't found by gathering more, but by learning what to gently release. This is the ancient wisdom of detachment, not as a cold withdrawal, but as the ultimate act of coming home to yourself. Let me begin with a story, a personal memory from many years ago. I was traveling through the high desert, a landscape of vast, silent expanses and relentless sun. My water supply was low, and I came upon a lone, gnarled tree offering the faintest shade. Under it sat an elderly woman, her face a map of wrinkles shaped by smiles, not frowns. She was weaving a basket from dry reeds, her movements fluid and unhurried. Thirsty and weary, I sat nearby. After a long silence, I gestured to my near-empty canteen and asked, "How do you find enough in a place like this?" She didn't point to a hidden spring. Instead, she held up her half-finished basket. "You see the spaces between the reeds?" she asked. Most people only see the reeds, the things they want to hold. They try to weave them tighter and tighter, until there is no space left. Then they wonder why their basket feels so heavy, and why the water they finally find just sits there, stagnant. "The secret," she whispered, tapping the gaps between the weave, "isn't in the holding. It's in the spaces you consciously leave. The desert doesn't give you less. It teaches you what is essential. Your spirit is the same. It needs space to hold what is truly nourishing." I've carried that basket in my mind for decades. We are all weavers, and our suffering often comes from weaving a basket with no spaces, cramming it with expectations, the need for approval, fears of the future, until our own spirit feels heavy and cramped. The practice of detachment is the gentle art of creating space in the weave. If this notion of creating space, of finding lightness, speaks to you, I warmly invite you to join our community here at Monk's Temple. Consider subscribing to this channel. It is a simple way to choose, again and again, to return to these teachings, to remind yourself to leave spaces in your weave. Your journey inward is a sacred one, and it helps to travel with companions. Now, let's continue. Buddhism, in its timeless clarity, offers us a lens to understand this heaviness. It teaches that at the root of most of our unease is a single, powerful habit, attachment, or upadana. We don't just experience things, we cling to them. We cling to people, wanting them to be permanent sources of our happiness. We cling to ideas of how our lives should look. We cling to our own self-image, defending it fiercely. Imagine your mind is a clear, still pond. An experience arises, a pleasant feeling, a thought, a sight, like a leaf falling onto the water's surface. The natural, untrained mind doesn't just observe the leaf. It jumps onto the leaf, tries to steer it, builds a tiny raft to live on it, and then fears the moment it will sink or drift away. This clinging, this building of a fragile home on every passing leaf, is exhausting. The pond's surface is churned into constant ripples. The Buddhist path invites us to something radically different, to sit peacefully on the bank of our own awareness, to watch the leaves, the thoughts, the feelings, the external events. Float onto the water, drift for a time, and then float away. We appreciate their color, their texture, but we do not move from our seat on the solid ground to live upon them. Our peace is in the steadfast bank, not in the precarious leaf. One of the first and most tender leaves we try to live upon is the need for validation from others. We construct a fragile raft from the opinions of those around us and call it our self-worth. We hand our inner compass to strangers and acquaintances, waiting for them to point us in the right direction of being acceptable, lovable, successful. When their directions are vague or contradictory, we feel lost. I learned this not in a temple, but in a noisy, fluorescent-lit community art class. I decided to take up painting, something I had no skill in. My first few attempts were, to be kind, chaotic smears of color. The instructor, a kind but blunt man, would pause behind me, sigh quietly, and move on. One week, a woman next to me, a talented portrait artist, glanced over and said with a sincere smile, "I love the fearlessness in your color choices." For days, I floated on that compliment. I was a fearless artist. The next week, a different classmate chuckled and said, "Looks like a happy accident." My raft sank. I felt exposed, a fraud. My entire enjoyment of the process, which had been about the feel of the brush and the smell of the paint, became hostage to these passing comments. I was trying to paint on the leaf of their opinions, and it was making me seasick. The shift came when I decided to paint one piece only for the trash can. No one would ever see it. With that intention, something released. I mixed colors I shouldn't. I made a mess. And in that mess, I found a pure joy unrelated to any outcome or appraisal. The painting was terrible, but the experience was liberating. I had taken my compass back. Buddhism teaches that this craving for external validation is a deep root of dukkha, suffering. It places the stability of your inner world on the ever-shifting ground of other people's inner worlds. Your worth is not a painting to be judged at a gallery. It is the innate capacity to be aware, to feel, to be present in the act of creation itself. No one can grade that. When you detach from the need for the A+ from the world, you stop being a student in a classroom where you never know the rules. You become the serene observer of the entire school. This leads us to a powerful and often painful form of clinging, our expectations. We don't just see people, we see the people we expect them to be. We paint an elaborate portrait in our minds of how a partner should act, how a friend should support us, how a parent should understand. Then, we spend our emotional energy being disappointed that the living, breathing person in front of us doesn't match the static painting we've created. We are in love with a ghost, and then we resent the real person for not being that ghost. Buddhism teaches that attachment to expectation is attachment to a fantasy. It is a recipe for endless frustration because you are arguing with reality, demanding it conform to an image that exists only in your thoughts. I witnessed this beautifully resolved in a friend named Leo. Leo had a brother, Mark, who was perpetually late, forgetful, and financially impulsive. For years, Leo was the responsible one, seething with quiet resentment. He held a portrait of Mark in his mind, the responsible brother. Every time Mark missed a family dinner or made a rash decision, Leo felt it as a personal betrayal of this portrait. Their relationship was a cold war of disappointed sighs. The change began on a hiking trip they took, somewhat reluctantly. Mark, of course, forgot the map. Leo erupted, listing decades of similar forgetfulness. Mark listened, then said quietly, "I'm not the guy who remembers the map, Leo. I'm the guy who finds the waterfall off the trail. You're the map guy. We're just different. In that moment, Leo's portrait shattered. He saw not a flawed version of a responsible brother, but a complete, different human being. An intuitive explorer, terrible with details but gifted with spontaneity. Leo detached from his expectation. He didn't have to approve of Mark's choices, but he released the demand that Mark be other than he was. Their relationship didn't become perfect, but the resentment vanished. It was replaced by a curious, almost humorous acceptance. Leo became the reliable map-bearer, and he learned to appreciate, even rely on, Mark's ability to spot the unexpected waterfall. The suffering wasn't in Mark's behavior, it was in Leo's unwavering expectation that he behave like Leo. When we detach from expectations, we don't stop caring. We start seeing. And in that clear seeing, we often find what was actually there, which is so much more interesting than our fantasy. Let's continue our journey. We've begun to look at the spaces in the weave, at how we cling to leaves of validation and portraits of expectation. Now, let's go a layer deeper, into the very stories we tell ourselves about who we are. One of the mind's most cunning habits is its ability to take a temporary event and spin it into a permanent identity. A failure at work becomes, I am a failure. A period of loneliness becomes, I am unlovable. A bout of anxiety becomes, I am an anxious person. This is like taking a single dark cloud passing before the sun and declaring, the sun is gone. The sky is now cloud. You have mistaken a weather pattern for the fundamental nature of the sky itself. Buddhism emphasizes the practice of anatta, or not self, which, among its profound meanings, invites us to see that we are not these solid, fixed things we believe ourselves to be. We are a flowing process. To attach a permanent label to yourself based on a passing experience is to freeze a river and call it a sculpture. It may have that shape for a moment, but its nature is to flow, to change. I fell into this trap myself, deeply, after a series of professional setbacks early in my life. Projects I cared about were cancelled. Proposals were rejected. For a year, it felt like every door I approached was locked. My mind, that master storyteller, began crafting a grand narrative. You are not meant for this path. You are the person things don't work out for. You have a fundamental flaw that repels success. I didn't just feel disappointment, I embodied the disappointment. I walked with its weight, spoke with its hesitation. I had taken a season of barren soil and declared it the permanent landscape of my life. What shifted it was not a sudden success, but a simple observation in a city park. I saw a tree that had been struck by lightning. Half of it was blackened, scarred, leafless. The other half was bursting with vibrant green foliage, reaching for the sun. A plaque explained the tree was preserved as a testament to resilience. I stood there, transfixed. The tree did not call itself the burned tree or the thriving tree. It was simply a tree that contained both experiences, trauma and growth, simultaneously. It wasn't one story, it was a complex, living history. My season of failure was just the lightning-scarred part of my being. It wasn't the whole story. It wasn't my identity. It was an event that happened to the fluid, ongoing process of me. I began to separate the experience from the experiencer. I am experiencing rejection, is a true, fleeting weather pattern. I am a reject, is a false, permanent label for the entire sky. When you practice this separation, you reclaim your vastness. You are not the storm. You are the spacious awareness that knows the storm is passing through. This work of releasing false identities brings us face to face with one of our greatest exhaustions, the need to control. We so often live as if we are the authors of a novel, painstakingly plotting each chapter, controlling each character's dialogue, and demanding a specific ending. When a character says something we didn't write, or the plot takes an unexpected twist, we panic. We grip the pen tighter, scratch out the new developments, and try to force the story back to our outline. Our life becomes a tense, exhausting effort at literary dictatorship. Buddhism presents a different metaphor. You are not the author. You are a character in the story, an important one, with free will and intention, and you are also the first, most attentive reader. Your power as the character is to act with integrity, compassion, and presence in each scene. This is your karma, your intentional action. But the overall plot, the interactions with other characters, the setting, the unforeseen events, these are the result of infinite causes and conditions, most far beyond your control. Your suffering is the friction between your detailed outline and the wild, organic story that is actually being written by life itself. A student shared a story that captures this perfectly. Maria was a brilliant event planner, used to orchestrating every minute detail to perfection. She applied this same meticulous control to her personal life, especially her daughter's path. She had mapped out the ideal trajectory: elite preschool, top grades, select sports, a prestigious university. Her daughter, Sophia, was artistic, introverted, and dreamed of being a wildlife illustrator. She struggled in structured team sports and preferred solitary walks in the woods to social competitions. Maria saw every deviation from the plan as a crisis to be managed. She pushed tutors, negotiated with coaches, her anxiety a constant hum. The turning point came on a forced, nature hike meant to build resilience. Sophia, usually quiet, came alive, pointing out bird calls, identifying plants, sketching a mushroom with breathtaking detail. Maria, busy worrying about the schedule and the dirt, finally stopped and truly saw her daughter, not a project off track, but a person in her element, radiant with a joy no trophy could provide. Maria's outline for successful daughter crumpled in her heart. She detached from her need to control the story and became a reader, a curious observer of the unique, beautiful character her daughter actually was. She began to support Sophia's art, to listen to her dreams of forests and field guides. The relief Maria felt was immense. She hadn't given up on being a parent, she had given up the exhausting, doomed role of divine author. She became a supportive co-creator in Sophia's authentic story. The control was an illusion. The real connection was in the attentive reading. Underneath this struggle for control often lies a quiet, entitled expectation, the belief that life should be gentle with us. We harbor a secret contract: if I am a good person, if I work hard and am kind, then life will be fair and shield me from major pain. We walk through the world holding this contract like a protective talisman. Then, when hardship strikes, an illness, a betrayal, a sudden loss, we feel not just pain, but a profound sense of betrayal. This isn't how it was supposed to be. I followed the rules. We shake our contract at the universe, demanding an explanation. Buddhism compassionately reveals this expectation as a major source of our agony. Life is not a morality play with guaranteed rewards. Life is nature. In nature, storms arise, trees fall, and seasons change without consulting our sense of fairness. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. The ground is hard for everyone who falls. Expecting life to be perpetually gentle is like expecting the ocean to have no waves. You will spend your time being outraged at the water for being wet. I remember a man in a coastal village I once visited, a fisherman named Henrik. He was known as the most generous soul in the town, always sharing his catch with the elderly, helping repair nets. One season, a freak storm destroyed his boat, his sole livelihood. The community rallied, offering support, but Henrik was inconsolable in a specific way. He was furious. "After all I've done," he'd shout at the sea. His suffering was doubled, first the material loss, and second, the shattered belief in a cosmic fairness he thought he had earned. He saw the storm as a personal punishment or a broken promise. For months, he sat on the shore, a monument to bitterness. Then, one morning, he watched the waves, the same waves that had taken his boat. He saw them simply as waves, powerful, impersonal, neither cruel nor kind. They were just being waves. In that moment, his contract with the universe dissolved. The storm wasn't about him. It was just a storm. This wasn't resignation, it was a profound alignment with reality. He stopped railing against the ocean and started building a new boat, not from a place of entitled demand, but from a place of humble partnership with a powerful, unpredictable force. His generosity remained, but it was now a pure expression of his heart, not a payment for safe passage. When we detach from the expectation of gentleness, we stop taking hardship personally. We meet difficulty not as a betrayed child, but as a resilient adult, understanding that rough seas are part of the journey, not a sign we are sailing wrong. Let's move deeper into the heart of the matter. We've touched on expectations, control, and identity. Now, we come to the foundational truth that makes all detachment not only possible but wise, the truth of impermanence, what Buddhism calls anicca. Everything that arises, passes away. Every feeling, every thought, every situation, every relationship, every cell in your body is in a state of constant flux. Our suffering is not in the change itself, but in our deep, often unconscious, resistance to it. We want the pleasant moments to freeze. We want the painful ones to vanish instantly. We want people and things to stay as they are. We are trying to build a permanent home on shifting sands, and then we are terrified and heartbroken when the ground moves. Understanding impermanence is not pessimistic, it is the ultimate realism. It is the key that unlocks the hand that clings. I learned this not from a scripture, but from a humble beekeeper in a valley of wildflowers. I was staying nearby, and each dawn, I'd watch him tend his hives. He worked with a slow, reverent calm. One morning, a new, overeager assistant was helping. The assistant, trying to be efficient, was smoking one hive too aggressively, wanting to get the job done, to move to the next. The old beekeeper gently took the smoker from his hands. "You are not commanding them," he said softly. "You are suggesting. You are working with a river of life. The queen may die tomorrow. The flowers may fade next week. The hive may swarm and leave. Your job is not to make any of this permanent. Your job is to tend the process today, with respect for its own intelligence and its own timeline. You cannot be attached to the honey of yesterday, or the hive of tomorrow. There is only the careful work of this moment." He was speaking of anicca. The hive was a living lesson in constant birth, work, decay, and transformation. Attachment to a specific outcome, a certain yield of honey, the perpetual health of a single queen, would only lead to frustration and harsh, controlling actions. Peace was in the mindful participation in the ever-changing process. Our lives are that hive. Our relationships, careers, health, and moods are all in a state of swarm and resettlement, blooming and fading. To detach is to become like that wise beekeeper, doing your part with utmost care and presence, but holding the outcome lightly, with a deep respect for the natural intelligence of change. This acceptance of impermanence directly softens one of our greatest fears, the fear of loss. We cling because we are afraid of the emptiness that might follow if we let go. But what if the emptiness is not a void, but a space? What if loss is not a robbery, but a completion? Imagine a beautiful, resonant bell. The bell maker's skill is in the shaping of the metal. But the true beauty, the sound, only happens when the bell is struck and then released. The cling would be to hold the mallet hard against the bell, creating only a dull thud and a strained silence. The music is in the strike and the letting go, allowing the vibration to fill the air and slowly, gracefully, fade into stillness. That fading is not a loss of the sound, it is part of its wholeness. Every relationship, every experience, every phase of life is a bell. We are meant to strike it fully, to feel its unique resonance with our entire being, and then, when its natural cycle completes, to allow it to fade. To cling is to muffle the music of your own life by holding the mallet of your fear against it. Grief is the natural, human echo of a beautiful sound that has faded. It is part of the music. Despair is the angry demand that the echo never fade, that the bell ring forever, a demand that tortures the ear and breaks the bell. Now, we turn to perhaps the most intimate arena of detachment, our relationship with our own thinking mind. This is where the majority of our daily suffering is generated. We have a narrator inside our head that never takes a coffee break. It comments, judges, replays, worries, fantasizes, and criticizes. That was stupid. What will they think? I should have said, what if this happens? We are so fused with this voice that we believe we are it. Our entire sense of self gets tangled in this endless, often anxious, monologue. Buddhism offers a liberating perspective. You are not the voice. You are the one who hears the voice. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise, like sounds arise in a silent room. Thoughts are just another sensory experience, like the feeling of your breath or the sight of this text. Detachment here is the practice of stepping back from the front row of your mental cinema, where the story feels overwhelmingly real, and moving to the back row, or even into the projection booth. From there, you can watch the movie, the drama of your thoughts, without being swept into the plot, without believing you are the character on the screen. Try this now, just for a moment. Close your eyes if you wish. Listen to the flow of your thoughts. Don't try to stop them. Just notice them. You might hear, "This is strange," or "I'm not sure I'm doing this right," or "What's for dinner?" Simply observe these thoughts as events. As if you are sitting by a stream, watching leaves, your thoughts, float by. You don't have to jump in and chase a leaf. You don't have to judge a leaf as a good leaf or a bad leaf. You just watch it appear, drift through your awareness, and disappear around the bend. The thought, "I'm a failure," is just a leaf. The thought, "Everything is wonderful," is just another leaf. Your true self is the stable, clear bank of the stream, the aware space that contains the flowing water. This practice of mindful observation is the essence of detaching from the thinking mind. You are learning to be with your experience without being hijacked by your commentary about the experience. A powerful story from my own practice illustrates this. For years, I struggled with a recurring sense of background anxiety, a free-floating unease that colored my days. I'd try to analyze it. Why am I anxious? What's wrong? What do I need to fix? This analysis was just more leaves on the stream, thoughts about thoughts, adding to the clutter. One retreat, in deep silence, the anxiety arose strongly. Instead of following my usual habit of wrestling with it, I decided to just sit and feel it, without the story. I dropped the question, why? And simply asked, where? I scanned my body. I found it as a tight, buzzing sensation in my chest. I stopped calling it anxiety and just felt it as pure sensation, tightness, vibration, heat. I observed it like a curious scientist. Within minutes, without any story to fuel it, the sensation began to shift, to soften, to move and eventually dissolve. The anxiety was not a monster to be slain, it was a bundle of physical energy I had been labeling and fearing. By detaching from the thought label, anxiety, and relating directly to the sensory experience, I disempowered the story. The mind will always generate thoughts. That's its job. Your freedom lies in changing your relationship to those thoughts, from prisoner of the narration to compassionate witness of the process. This work of witnessing is the gateway to true inner silence. Silence is not the absence of sound or thought. It is the absence of reactivity to sound and thought. It is the deep, still pool beneath the chattering waves on the surface. As we practice detaching from the compulsive grip of our mental commentary, we sink below the waves and discover this pool. Here, in this quiet, decisions become clearer, intuition speaks, and a profound peace resides that is not dependent on the weather of the mind. Let us continue our journey inward, to a place where the silence we've begun to cultivate meets the world outside. We've practiced observing the stream of thoughts, finding the bank of awareness. Now, we explore how to step from that bank back into the flow of life, not to be swept away, but to move within it with grace and purpose. This is where detachment blossoms into its most beautiful form, compassionate engagement. It is the difference between a wall that isolates and a bridge that connects while remaining steadfast. There is a profound misunderstanding that to detach is to stop caring. Nothing could be further from the truth. Attachment is a sticky, needy, fearful kind of care. It says, I care for you because I need you to make me feel secure, happy, or whole. Its shadow is resentment, anxiety, and control. Detached care, what Buddhism calls metta, loving kindness, or karuna, compassion, is a clear, spacious kind of care. It says, I care for your happiness because I recognize your inherent worth, and my own heart is already peaceful enough to wish you well. My caring does not come with strings attached to my own unmet needs. One is a thirsty person offering you a drink from their only, nearly empty cup, anxiously watching you sip. The other is a person sitting by a full well, freely offering you water, joyfully watching you drink their fill. I saw this embodied in a nurse named Anya, who worked in a hospice. Her job was, by definition, a continuous practice of loving detachment. Patients would come, she would connect with them deeply, listen to their stories, hold their hands, and then, inevitably, she would bear witness to their passing. If she attached, if she made each patient a personal project for salvation, if she needed them to get better to validate her worth, the job would have destroyed her. Instead, she cultivated a profound, sober love. She explained it to me once: I am not here to stop the river from flowing to the sea. I am here to be a calm, beautiful stretch of bank for them as they float by. I provide comfort, dignity, and presence. But I do not own their journey, and I do not follow them into the ocean. My heart is the bank, not the river. She cared immensely, but her sense of self was not tied to outcomes she could never control. Her ability to care so deeply for so many came precisely from her lack of clinging to any one of them. Her heart was spacious because it was not crammed with personal agenda. This is the power of detached love. It is sustainable, boundless, and free of the burnout that comes from needy attachment. This principle transforms all our relationships. Think of the people in your life. How often do we love them with a hidden list of conditions? I will love you if you make me feel important, if you agree with me, if you stay as you are, if you meet my expectations. This conditional love is a transaction, and like all transactions, it breeds scorekeeping and disappointment. Detached love is a gift, given freely, without an expectation of a return gift. It allows the other person to be a river, changing, flowing, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm. You appreciate the river from the bank. You don't try to dam it or redirect it to water only your own garden. I remember a couple, Elias and Sam, who had been together for nearly 40 years. Early on, Elias was a restless traveler, Sam a homebody who loved his garden. For years, there was tension. Elias felt stifled, Sam felt abandoned. They were each attached to their own idea of how a partner should be, more adventurous, more settled. The shift came not when one changed, but when both detached from their fixed images. Elias began to see Sam's gardening not as boring domestication, but as a deep, rooted creativity. A different kind of journey into the soul of a single patch of earth. Sam began to see Elias's travels not as an escape from him, but as a way Elias replenished his spirit, and he would welcome Elias home to vivid stories and a peaceful garden. They stopped needing the other to complete their own sense of self. They became two strong, different trees growing side by side, their branches sometimes touching, sometimes swaying in separate breezes, but their roots silently intertwined in a deep, mutual respect for the other's way of being. Their love became spacious. It had room for both the suitcase and the trowel. This is the freedom detachment offers, love without confinement. Now, let us apply this same spaciousness to a concept that often feels anything but spacious: our life's work, our purpose. We attach so heavily to outcomes, to promotions, accolades, visible success. We tie our identity to our job title. I am a manager, a writer, a doctor. Then, if that role is lost or changed, we feel we are lost. Or, we attach to a specific dream with such ferocity that every setback feels like a cosmic denial of our destiny. Buddhism teaches right livelihood, which is less about the specific job and more about the spirit with which you do any job. It is about bringing presence, integrity, and non-harm to your actions. Detachment here means pouring your full effort into your work while releasing a stranglehold on the result. It is the difference between a woodcarver who carves to create a famous masterpiece, and is tortured by every imperfect chip, and a woodcarver who carves for the love of the grain, the feel of the tool, the emergence of form from the wood. The masterpiece may or may not come, but the carver finds fulfillment in the conscious act of carving itself. A young entrepreneur, Lena, taught me this. She launched a startup based on a passionate idea. For 3 years, she lived and breathed it, sacrificing health and relationships. She wasn't just building a company, she was building the monument to her own worth. When the startup failed, it wasn't just a business failure, it was an identity collapse. She was a failure. It took her a year of deep depression to begin to separate. She started taking long walks with no goal. She volunteered at a community kitchen, simply chopping vegetables. In the repetitive, humble act of chopping, with no stock options or pitch decks involved, she found a quiet joy. She was just a person, helping, being present. From that empty, quiet space, she eventually saw that her original passion was still there, but it was no longer a beast of burden carrying her self-esteem. She began a new, smaller project, not to prove anything, but as an authentic expression of her skills. This time, her effort was full, but her grip was light. The project's success or failure no longer had the power to define her. She had discovered that her purpose was not a destination to be reached, but a quality of attention to be brought to whatever was in front of her. Her right livelihood became presence itself. This brings us to a subtle but powerful attachment. The attachment to our own spiritual progress. Even on a path of letting go, we can start clinging to the idea of being a good Buddhist, enlightened, or always peaceful. We judge ourselves for having judgments. We get angry at ourselves for feeling anger. This is the ego's final, clever trick, to co-opt the path of release and turn it into another achievement to grasp. True detachment must include detachment from the spiritual self-image. It means allowing yourself to be a messy, imperfect human who is practicing, not a finished saint who has arrived. The moment you think, "I am so detached," you have attached to the idea of detachment. I recall a time on a long retreat. I was having a good period, my mind was calm, my sitting was effortless. I felt a quiet pride. I'm finally getting it, I thought. The next day, a fellow practitioner made an offhand comment that irritated me profoundly. My calm vanished in a flash of heat. Instead of simply noticing the irritation, I was flooded with a second layer of shame and frustration. A truly detached person wouldn't feel this. I've lost it. My suffering was now doubled, first the original irritation, and second, my attachment to my self-image as a serene practitioner. The teacher, seeing my stormy face, simply smiled and said, "The weather changes. The sky does not congratulate itself for being blue, nor does it scold itself for being cloudy. It just is." That was the teaching. Detachment isn't about maintaining clear blue skies in your mind at all costs. It's about being the sky that knows it is inherently untouched by all weather patterns, whether they are storms of pride or clouds of irritation. You must let go of being the perfect detacher, too. Let us continue our journey inward, to a place where the silence we've begun to cultivate meets the world outside. We've practiced observing the stream of thoughts, finding the bank of awareness. Now, we explore how to step from that bank back into the flow of life, not to be swept away, but to move within it with grace and purpose. This is where detachment blossoms into its most beautiful form, compassionate engagement. It is the difference between a wall that isolates and a bridge that connects while remaining steadfast. There is a profound misunderstanding that to detach is to stop caring. Nothing could be further from the truth. Attachment is a sticky, needy, fearful kind of care. It says, I care for you because I need you to make me feel secure, happy, or whole. Its shadow is resentment, anxiety, and control. Detached care, what Buddhism calls metta, loving-kindness, or karuna, compassion, is a clear, spacious kind of care. It says, I care for your happiness because I recognize your inherent worth, and my own heart is already peaceful enough to wish you well. My caring does not come with strings attached to my own unmet needs. One is a thirsty person offering you a drink from their only, nearly empty cup, anxiously watching you sip. The other is a person sitting by a full well, freely offering you water, joyfully watching you drink their fill. I saw this embodied in a nurse named Anya, who worked in a hospice. Her job was, by definition, a continuous practice of loving detachment. Patients would come, she would connect with them deeply, listen to their stories, hold their hands, and then, inevitably, she would bear witness to their passing. If she attached, if she made each patient a personal project for salvation, if she needed them to get better to validate her worth, the job would have destroyed her. Instead, she cultivated a profound, sober love. She explained it to me once, I am not here to stop the river from flowing to the sea. I am here to be a calm, beautiful stretch of bank for them as they float by. I provide comfort, dignity, and presence. But I do not own their journey, and I do not follow them into the ocean. My heart is the bank, not the river. She cared immensely, but her sense of self was not tied to outcomes she could never control. Her ability to care so deeply for so many came precisely from her lack of clinging to any one of them. Her heart was spacious because it was not crammed with personal agenda. This is the power of detached love. It is sustainable, boundless, and free of the burnout that comes from needy attachment. This principle transforms all our relationships. Think of the people in your life. How often do we love them with a hidden list of conditions? I will love you if you make me feel important, if you agree with me, if you stay as you are, if you meet my expectations. This conditional love is a transaction, and like all transactions, it breeds scorekeeping and disappointment. Detached love is a gift, given freely, without an expectation of a return gift. It allows the other person to be a river, changing, flowing, sometimes turbulent, sometimes calm. You appreciate the river from the bank, you don't try to dam it or redirect it to water only your own garden. I remember a couple, Elias and Sam, who had been together for nearly 40 years. Early on, Elias was a restless traveler, Sam a homebody who loved his garden. For years, there was tension. Elias felt stifled, Sam felt abandoned. They were each attached to their own idea of how a partner should be, more adventurous, more settled. The shift came not when one changed, but when both detached from their fixed images. Elias began to see Sam's gardening not as boring domestication, but as a deep, rooted creativity. A different kind of journey into the soul of a single patch of earth. Sam began to see Elias's travels not as an escape from him, but as a way Elias replenished his spirit, and he would welcome Elias home to vivid stories and a peaceful garden. They stopped needing the other to complete their own sense of self. They became two strong, different trees growing side by side, their branches sometimes touching, sometimes swaying in separate breezes, but their roots silently intertwined in a deep, mutual respect for the other's way of being. Their love became spacious. It had room for both the suitcase and the trowel. This is the freedom detachment offers, love without confinement. Now, let us apply this same spaciousness to a concept that often feels anything but spacious, our life's work, our purpose. We attach so heavily to outcomes, to promotions, accolades, visible success. We tie our identity to our job title. I am a manager, a writer, a doctor. Then, if that role is lost or changed, we feel we are lost. Or, we attach to a specific dream with such ferocity that every setback feels like a cosmic denial of our destiny. Buddhism teaches right livelihood, which is less about the specific job and more about the spirit with which you do any job. It is about bringing presence, integrity, and non-harm to your actions. Detachment here means pouring your full effort into your work while releasing a stranglehold on the result. It is the difference between a woodcarver who carves to create a famous masterpiece, and is tortured by every imperfect chip, and a woodcarver who carves for the love of the grain, the feel of the tool, the emergence of form from the wood. The masterpiece may or may not come, but the carver finds fulfillment in the conscious act of carving itself. A young entrepreneur, Lena, taught me this. She launched a startup based on a passionate idea. For 3 years, she lived and breathed it, sacrificing health and relationships. She wasn't just building a company, she was building the monument to her own worth. When the startup failed, it wasn't just a business failure, it was an identity collapse. She was a failure. It took her a year of deep depression to begin to separate. She started taking long walks with no goal. She volunteered at a community kitchen, simply chopping vegetables. In the repetitive, humble act of chopping, with no stock options or pitch decks involved, she found a quiet joy. She was just a person, helping, being present. From that empty, quiet space, she eventually saw that her original passion was still there, but it was no longer a beast of burden carrying her self-esteem. She began a new, smaller project, not to prove anything, but as an authentic expression of her skills. This time, her effort was full, but her grip was light. The project's success or failure no longer had the power to define her. She had discovered that her purpose was not a destination to be reached, but a quality of attention to be brought to whatever was in front of her. Her right livelihood became presence itself. This brings us to a subtle but powerful attachment, the attachment to our own spiritual progress. Even on a path of letting go, we can start clinging to the idea of being a good Buddhist, enlightened, or always peaceful. We judge ourselves for having judgments. We get angry at ourselves for feeling anger. This is the ego's final, clever trick, to co-opt the path of release and turn it into another achievement to grasp. True detachment must include detachment from the spiritual self-image. It means allowing yourself to be a messy, imperfect human who is practicing, not a finished saint who has arrived. The moment you think, "I am so detached," you have attached to the idea of detachment. I recall a time on a long retreat. I was having a good period, my mind was calm, my sitting was effortless. I felt a quiet pride. I'm finally getting it, I thought. The next day, a fellow practitioner made an offhand comment that irritated me profoundly. My calm vanished in a flash of heat. Instead of simply noticing the irritation, I was flooded with a second layer of shame and frustration. A truly detached person wouldn't feel this. I've lost it. My suffering was now doubled, first the original irritation, and second, my attachment to my self-image as a serene practitioner. The teacher, seeing my stormy face, simply smiled and said, "The weather changes. The sky does not congratulate itself for being blue, nor does it scold itself for being cloudy. It just is." That was the teaching. Detachment isn't about maintaining clear blue skies in your mind at all costs. It's about being the sky that knows it is inherently untouched by all weather patterns, whether they are storms of pride or clouds of irritation. You must let go of being the perfect detacher, too. Now, we turn toward the places where our practice is tested, where the concept of detachment meets the raw, human experiences of grief, fear, and failure. It is one thing to speak of non-attachment while watching clouds from a quiet hillside. It is another to embody it when the ground shakes beneath your feet, when loss arrives, or when fear grips your heart with cold hands. This is where the wisdom we've been cultivating proves its worth, not as a way to avoid pain, but as a way to move through it without being destroyed by it. Let us first speak of grief. To grieve is human, and to suggest we should detach from it would be a profound misunderstanding. Detachment is not a bypass. It does not mean you will not feel the searing ache of loss, the hollow absence, the torrent of tears. What it changes is your relationship to that grief. Attachment to grief looks like building a shrine to the past and moving in. It is the belief that the depth of your love is measured by the permanence of your pain. It is the mind telling stories. I will never be happy again. My life is over. That was my only chance. This is identification. You are not feeling grief, you have become grief itself. Detached grief is different. It is the capacity to sit with the profound sorrow, to let it wash through you, while a deeper part of you, the witnessing awareness, knows, this is grief. This is the natural, heartbreaking response to love and loss. It is here. I am feeling it fully. You do not cling to it as an identity. You allow it as a process. You are the sky, vast and allowing, holding the devastating storm of grief. The storm is real, it is powerful, and it will pass. Your essence as the sky remains. I remember a woman named Cora, whose son had passed away. For the first year, she was, understandably, engulfed. She wore his clothes, kept his room untouched, and spoke of him in the present tense. Her grief was a fortress she lived inside. One day, a friend asked her gently, "What would your son wish for you, right now, in this moment?" The question pierced her fortress. She realized that in her attachment to the pain, which felt like loyalty to her son, she was refusing to live, which was the very opposite of what a loving child would wish for a parent. She began the agonizing, slow practice of detachment. She didn't stop loving him. She didn't stop feeling the grief. But she began to separate the pain from the love. The love was eternal, a bond that death could not touch. The pain was the visceral, temporary human response to physical absence. She started to let small bits of life back in, a walk, a conversation about something else, a moment of noticing a flower. She was not abandoning her son, she was reclaiming her own life, which was the vessel that had carried her love for him all along. Her grief softened from a hard, permanent shell into a tender, sometimes overwhelming, but fluid presence in her heart. This is the grace of detachment in the face of loss. It allows you to honor the love by continuing to live, not by joining the loved one in a kind of emotional death. Next, we meet fear. Fear is often the guardian of attachment. We are afraid of losing what we have, afraid of not getting what we want, afraid of the unknown. The mind strategy is to clench tighter, to plan more frantically, to try to control the uncontrollable. Detachment approaches fear with curiosity instead of resistance. It asks, what is this fear protecting? What attachment is it defending? Often, you will find it is defending an idea, the idea of safety, the idea of your self-image, the idea of a certain future. When you see that the fear is not about the present moment reality, but about a mental projection, its power begins to dissolve. You can then feel the physical sensations of fear, the tight chest, the quickened pulse, without buying into the catastrophic story the mind is spinning. A powerful lesson on this came from an unexpected teacher, a rock climber I met. He described the phenomenon of sewing machine leg, when fear causes a climber's leg to shake uncontrollably on a small foothold. If you fight it, if you try to stop the shake, you'll exhaust yourself and fall, he said. The technique is to acknowledge it, there's fear, and then gently shift your weight, ever so slightly, to another point of contact. You move with the shake, you don't fight it. You focus on the next single, manageable move, not the dizzying drop below. This is a perfect metaphor. Our mental fear is the sewing machine leg. Our attachment is to being perfectly still and safe. Detachment is the acknowledgement and the gentle, conscious shift of attention to what you can do right now. The next breath, the next small action. You don't deny the drop, the real risk, but you don't stare at it until you're paralyzed. You trust your ability to make the next move, and then the next. Buddhism teaches that fear cannot survive in the actual present moment, it needs a projected future to feed on. By detaching from the future story and rooting yourself in the sensory reality of now, the feel of the rock, the rhythm of your breath, you drain fear of its fuel. And then, there is failure. Our culture is deeply attached to success as a measure of worth. Therefore, we are equally attached to avoiding failure, which we see as evidence of worthlessness. This turns every endeavor into a high-stakes game where our very identity is on the line. Detachment from outcome, which we've discussed, is the antidote here. But we must also detach from the story we build around failure. A failure is an event. I am a failure is a prison. The detached view sees failure as feedback, not fate. It is a signpost, often a very clear one, saying, this specific approach, under these conditions, did not yield the expected result. It is information, rich with data about the world and about yourself. It is a necessary part of learning, of growth, of any creative or exploratory process. I think of a potter I knew who held a monthly smash night in her studio. At the end of the month, she and her students would take all the pots that hadn't turned out. The cracked, the warped, the ugly ones, and hurl them into a dedicated recycling bin. It was a ritual of celebration, not mourning. This, she would say, holding up a lopsided vase, taught me about the consistency of clay when I wedged it poorly. It has done its job. Its job was not to sit on a shelf. Its job was to teach me. Thank you. And smash. She was detached from each individual pot as a testament to her skill. She was attached to the ongoing process of learning. Her identity was learner, not producer of perfect pots. This attitude transforms the landscape of effort. Failure is no longer a monster to be feared, but a sometimes harsh, always honest, teacher. When you detach your worth from success, you become free to engage fully, to risk, to fail magnificently, and to learn profoundly. Your resilience is born from this very freedom. In all these difficult territories, grief, fear, failure, detachment does not make you a stone. It makes you like water. A stone, when struck by a hard force, can crack or shatter. Water, when struck, yields. It absorbs the force, ripples intensely, and then returns to its essential, fluid nature. It does not retain the shape of the blow. To live with a detached heart is to become more like water, fully feeling the impact of life's events, allowing the waves of emotion to move through you, but always knowing your fundamental nature is fluid, resilient, and whole. You feel the grief without becoming broken. You feel the fear without becoming paralyzed. You feel the setback without becoming defeated. This is not invulnerability. It is the ultimate, gentle strength. We have journeyed through the landscapes of release, letting go of validation, expectations, control, and the tyrannical inner voice. We have seen how this practice meets our grief, our fear, and our failures. Now, we arrive at the integration, at the living, breathing reality of a life shaped by this understanding. What does it look like, feel like, to walk through the world with a detached heart? It is not a life of emptiness, but of profound fullness. It is not a life of cold isolation, but of warm, connected freedom. It is the maturation of the spirit, where wisdom becomes your natural posture. Imagine your awareness as a vast, clear lake. For most of our lives, we live on the surface, tossed by every wind of opinion, every wave of circumstance, every storm of emotion. We are the choppy, reactive water. The practice of detachment is the process of learning to sink gently beneath that surface turmoil, down into the still, cool, silent depths. In these depths, there is calm. The storms rage above, but here, there is only a gentle, swaying peace. From this depth, you can look up and see the surface storms for what they are. Temporary disturbances. You no longer need to be them. You can choose when to rise to engage, and when to rest in the deep quiet. This is the unshakable peace that Buddhism points toward. It is not the absence of surface weather, it is the profound stability of the depths. Your happiness is no longer at the mercy of the weather because you have discovered you are the entire lake, not just the reactive surface. This inner stability transforms your entire presence in the world. You become less reactive. When criticism comes, instead of a flash of heat and a defensive retort, there is a moment of spaciousness. You can feel the sting, acknowledge it as a sensation, and then from the depths, choose a response, or choose no response at all. The comment does not define you, it is just another ripple on the surface. When praise comes, it is enjoyed, appreciated like a warm sunbeam on the water, but you do not become dependent on it for your warmth. You do not need to grasp it and demand it last forever. This emotional equilibrium is not numbness, it is the highest form of sensitivity. You feel everything more clearly because the feelings are not amplified and distorted by the echo chamber of your own frantic clinging. I witnessed this in a schoolteacher named Ben. His classroom was known as a haven of calm, even though he taught a lively group of children. One day, a particularly challenging student hurled a cruel insult at him in front of the class. The room froze. Old Ben would have erupted, sent the child to the office, and fumed for hours. This day, Ben simply paused. He took a quiet breath that was visible to everyone. He looked at the student, not with anger, but with a calm, almost curious expression. "You must be carrying some real pain to say something like that," he said, his voice steady. "That's not okay to say in here, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But first, is there something you need right now?" The student, disarmed by the lack of expected drama, deflated. The tension in the room dissolved. Ben had not been attached to his image as an authority figure who must never be disrespected. He was attached to his deeper role as a compassionate guide. From the depths of his lake, he saw the child's pain beneath the surface behavior. His detached response de-escalated the situation and provided a lesson in emotional regulation more powerful than any lecture. His peace was unshakable because it was rooted in something deeper than his momentary social standing. This way of being also reframes your relationship with time. The attached mind is a time traveler, perpetually lost in the ghost town of the past or the mirage of the future. It is rarely here. The detached mind, having released its cling to past regrets and future anxieties, settles naturally into the present. And in the present, a miracle occurs. Life is almost always manageable. The present moment is rarely the problem. The problem is the mental burden of 1,000 past moments and 1,000 imagined future ones that we drag into the now. When you put that burden down, you find that now is often quite simple. It may contain pain, but it is a clean pain, not a tangled web of story. It may contain work, but it is just this next action, not the weight of the entire career. Living in the present is the ultimate practical application of detachment. It is where you actually meet life. A simple practice illustrates this: the next 3 feet. When you feel overwhelmed by a task, a journey, a problem, detach from the enormity of the whole thing. Bring your awareness down to the next 3 feet of the path. If you're writing, just the next 3 words. If you're walking, just the next 3 steps. If you're cleaning, just the next 3 square feet of counter. Your mind, when attached, wants to swallow the whole mountain at once and then panics at the size. Detachment allows you to see that you never have to climb the whole mountain. You only ever have to take the step that is directly in front of you. The past steps are done. The future steps are not here. There is only this step. This dissolves procrastination, anxiety, and overwhelm. Life becomes a sustainable, step-by-step journey of presence. Finally, this integrated, detached life leads to what can only be called a quiet, joyful reverence for existence itself. When you are no longer trying to extract something specific from life, validation, permanence, certainty, you begin to see life as it is, a mysterious, fleeting, breathtaking gift. You stop seeing the world as a supermarket where you must grab what you need before it closes, and you start seeing it as a living museum, a sacred art exhibit where you are an honored guest. You can admire the painting without needing to own it. You can appreciate the music without needing the concert never to end. This reverence fills you with a gentle, pervasive gratitude. You are grateful for the morning light, not because it signals a productive day, but simply because it is beautiful. You are grateful for a stranger's smile, not because it means they like you, but because it is a tiny flash of shared humanity. Your happiness becomes decentralized. It is no longer a trophy on a high shelf that you must earn and protect. It is the very air you breathe, the ground you walk on. It is your default state when you are not cluttering it with want. An elderly woman in my neighborhood embodied this. She had little, her body was frail, but she was the happiest person I knew. Her daily ritual was to sit on her porch and watch the street. She didn't just watch, she beheld. She would point out the way the sun hit a car's windshield, creating a rainbow. She'd note the determined march of an ant across the pavement. She'd chuckle at the playful fight of squirrels. She was not waiting for anything more exciting to happen. That was the excitement. She was utterly detached from any narrative that this was just sitting. For her, it was a front row seat to the magnificent, ever-changing theater of existence. She had let go of the need for her life to be a grand, dramatic story, and in that release, she found the grand drama in every single, quiet moment. She was not just at peace, she was in a state of continuous, humble wonder. This is the promise of the path. It does not lead you out of the world, but more deeply into it, with clearer eyes and a lighter heart. You trade the heavy armor of attachment for the simple, sturdy clothes of awareness. You trade the exhausting campaign to control life for the graceful art of dancing with it. And so we arrive here, at the end of our shared exploration, and truly, at a new beginning for your own. We have walked through the landscapes of letting go, through the quiet rooms of the heart where we once stored our need for approval, our expectations, our fears. We have learned to observe the mind's chatter like clouds passing through a vast, still sky. We have practiced feeling grief without becoming it, meeting fear without feeding it, and seeing failure not as an end, but as a bend in the river of learning. If there is one single thread woven through all these teachings, it is this: peace is not something you find. It is something you uncover by removing what covers it. You are not building a sanctuary of calm from scratch. You are clearing away the clutter, the mental furniture of old stories, the dusty trophies of past validation, the blueprints for future castles, to reveal the sanctuary that was always there, underfoot. Your true nature is not anxious, needy, or fragile. It is aware, spacious, and inherently whole. Buddhism doesn't give you this wholeness. It simply points out that you have never, for a single moment, been without it. You have only been preoccupied with the clutter. Detachment, then, is the gentle art of clearing. It is not a violent purge, but a patient, compassionate sorting. You hold each item, a belief, a habit, a clinging thought, and ask with kindness, does this bring peace, or does it bring heaviness? Does this feel like truth, or does it feel like a story? And then, you simply set the heavy things down. You do not need to throw them across the room in anger. You do not need to begrudge them for having been there. You thank them for whatever service they provided, and you place them gently aside. This is how you come home to yourself. Not with a dramatic flourish, but with a series of quiet, deliberate releases. What remains when the clearing is done? Not emptiness. Aliveness. A profound sensitivity to the present moment. A love that is free because it asks for nothing in return. A joy that is quiet not because it is small, but because it is deep, like a well that never runs dry. You will find yourself smiling more easily at small things. You will feel sorrow without despair. You will act not from a place of, what can I get, but from a place of, what is needed here. Your life becomes less of a performance and more of a sincere expression. This is the ultimate protection for your happiness. You are no longer guarding a fragile treasure on a shaky shelf. You are realizing you are the ocean, and happiness is your natural state when the winds of attachment cease to churn your surface. Storms may come, but they cannot disturb your depths. So, as we part ways in this dialogue, I offer you a simple practice, a touchstone for your days ahead. Let it be this: pause and feel the space. In any moment of tension, confusion, or rush, simply pause. Feel the physical space around your body. Feel the space between your thoughts. Feel the space in the room, in the sky. In that feeling, remember, you are not the objects in the space, nor the thoughts filling it. You are the aware, spacious presence that holds it all. From that remembering, act. Or from that remembering, choose not to act. Let your life flow from that inner stillness. Thank you for spending this time at the monk's temple. May the clarity of your own awareness be your guide. May your heart remain light, your mind clear, and your spirit at ease. Walk gently. Let go gracefully. And remember, peace isn't ahead of you on the path. It is the ground beneath every step you take. Be well.